So this is Brody's take on the racial landscape of Western civilization and how that relates to the battle of the sexes. So I'm going to talk about this on a variety of levels because I think this is a very important topic to cover. I'm going to start off by saying I'm both pro-black and pro-love, right? So one of those two things is there, I'm probably down for it. I think you should have both there, but if you can't have both there, if you find the best genetic bang for your buck, the best treatment bang for your buck elsewhere, cool. But I'm talking about your genetic buck, right? Because if you're masculine submissive, you can find somebody who has a lower requirement of what it takes for them to be cooperative with you. I think a big part of what goes on in this day and age in society is, one, it's about the trauma and the upbringing, right? The propaganda and narratives that get pushed within media, right? Another aspect of it is fathers in the home who aren't simps, right? Another aspect of it is religious sexual repression, right? That's another part that plays into it. Another aspect of it is there's this idea of seeing something that is lighter, like white, light, being seen as good, dark, being seen as bad or more masculine. So even if you take away the moral implications of black being seen as bad, dark is typically seen as more masculine, right? So oftentimes, a man may automatically see a woman as slightly more feminine because she has lighter skin. And I don't share that perspective, but I understand the rationale behind it. And another thing is this, is oftentimes if a man is seen as darker, he's seen as more masculine because he's darker. So one thing you'll see a lot of in the black community is light-skinned women say they want a dark-skinned man, dark-skinned men saying that they want a light-skinned woman, or having a preference for somebody who is a different skin tone or race than they are. Because there's certain things that these things denote. It's like the gender flex theory. So how the gender flex theory can work is like, well, as a man or as a woman, size being larger typically indicates or correlates in people's mind to being masculine. So if a woman is above average in her size, it's like a gender flex theory. So if she's still able to have a good shape and be attractive when she's technically overweight, to some men it's going to be even more attractive than women who are naturally, a natural size or in shape. For some men, they like the idea of a dark-skinned woman, and not just from a perspective of saying, oh, that's just that beautiful to me. It's like, no, it's like a flex, because a lot of people, they're going to see against that. So if you can find somebody who's very attractive and they display those traits, then there's something that can be attractive to you. I think a big part of what goes on in the racial landscape and how that goes along with the battle of the sexes is that black men and black women, they get caught up in a mindset of seeing what is white is what is right. I don't judge somebody who finds love outside of their race. But somebody who makes a habit of regularly looking down on or bypassing women of their own race, regardless of what their race is, and purposefully seeking to date somebody outside of their race is something that it is difficult for me to respect that to a certain extent. Now, I'm a black man, so I love black women, so I understand people outside of the race want black women, because I want black women, right? That's what I like. But it don't always work like that. Sometimes you don't have shit, and when you don't have shit, maybe that woman, she'll see the potential in you and she'll fuck with you. Another part of it is cultural. Is internalized definitions of masculinity, internalized definitions of femininity. So oftentimes for a man, a woman who is, or oftentimes for a woman, if she grows up in the hood, chances are the people who she saw as the most dominant within her cultural landscape were maybe the drug dealers, maybe the gangbangers, maybe the people who were willing to shoot some niggas. So if you grow up as a black nerd, even if you have a certain level of masculinity to you, if you don't have a high enough natural level of sex appeal, you aren't hitting on the archetypes that sexually attract that woman just through the way that you present yourself. So Some men, they don't have a certain level of masculinity necessarily, but because they fit into a certain archetype, they fit into a certain box and stereotype, it automatically triggers thoughts of sex, because in somebody's mind, their fantasies may have been related to that. Maybe they fetishize whatever that is. Maybe they were in a situation where a black woman, let's say she was underage, maybe she was like 14, 15, 16 in high school, dealing with a man who's like 22, 23, 24, 25, because he may have been feminine dominant, didn't care about the laws, didn't care about the rules. He came through, dropped some dick off on her. So that became her imprint. Shout out to Ron Wills on the whole imprint topic. And I think he said he got the imprint topic from Master Yao. I'm not 100% sure. I don't remember that 100%, but that's part of it. Another aspect of it could be economical, social class. So let's say a woman is getting to a masculine submissive position, right, where she wants a man who is going to be willing to do certain things. Then maybe, well, not maybe, more white men have more money than most black men. Now, one thing is this: most black women aren't going to have the option of just dating a white man with money. Oftentimes it doesn't happen. People need to understand what being fetishized is, and how if you already love somebody and you fetishize them, that's cool, right? If you fetishize somebody in a way that's sustainable and respectable, cool. But sometimes people fetishize people in a sexual way to where they really don't have any long-term implications. And if while they fetishize somebody and then give them better treatment, that person has become overstimulated. Because let's say as a black man, just being black itself can denote a certain level of masculinity or dominance to a white woman in a way to where she's naturally going to fetishize you and have a somewhat higher level of sexual attraction to you than just the black women that are going to be within your vicinity. Right? Also, a lot of white women, and there are definitely some who go through trauma, they go through a lot of shit in their lifetime, but when you don't have to struggle as much, or you're not being pushed on this idea of having to be so strong, then oftentimes you can grow up and not feel the need to get as deeply into your masculine energy in order to do certain things. Also, the religious sexual repression side makes it so that a lot of white women are a little bit less religiously sexually repressed than black women are, and that's just true. That's just true. And what I mean by repression, it doesn't just mean that she'll won't do certain things, but I mean as far as what they're willing to do for one person that they're not willing to do for another. So for a lot of black men, they'll find a white woman who will take them being proper, will take them being nerdy, but see their black skin as something that still makes them a certain level of masculine, fetishize that, and then she's still able to be a certain level of sexually attracted to him and still be a certain level of feminine with him. Another thing is this: other cultures, like outside of being black, they're taught more in the home about how to actually be a cooperative wife, or how to be a woman who's cooperative to her man. So when that's the circumstance that goes along with it, something to understand within those different situations is that it's going to be easier for them to be cooperative than it is going to be for black women. For black women, it's more difficult to be cooperative because heavy levels of bad leadership, heavy levels of, masculinity that's pushed on the women, especially black women in the community, images that are pushed within media that make black women think that being quote unquote strong and independent is the peak of what it means to be themselves. So oftentimes people will have to fetishize something in order to step outside of their box. They want to try something new. And sometimes when they try something new, they like it and they stick with it. But there are also a lot of black men and a lot of black women who try to use the idea of dating someone outside of their race as like a threat or a neg or a dig at somebody within their own race to try to stir up jealousy to get them to behave better. I think that's goofy as fuck that black men do that sometimes. Like, don't use white women to try to tell black women what they need to do. That's kind of weird. I think that if you can't get women within your own race to treat you well, then chances are there's a good chance that those women outside of your race are not really on your program as well as you think they are. There's a different way that things work culturally. Like, black women tend to be a little bit more upfront about shit that they don't like. And like in the words of Patrice O'Neal, like a black woman, she's gonna say some shit. right? And it might be loud. Now, not with me. It ain't gonna do that shit with me. But something else that can occur is this. For a white woman, she might be a little bit more passive aggressive with how she takes shots at your masculinity. So there's a lot of different things that go along with the racial landscape. I do think that men that go out of their way, like, because my mindset on it is like this, and I know this is a rant. Almost all my videos are rants. I don't really like the idea of a man dating black women his whole life, and then the moment he gets some money, now he feels like he's moving on to the east side by dealing with a white woman. And then when he goes marries a white woman, when he's in the industry or whatever it is, now he's in a position where whatever wealth he makes goes to her. I mean, if you got a woman who's feminine submissive, she on your program, cool, you know what I mean? But at the same time, you got to think politically a little bit sometimes. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. You say, okay, cool, I don't want, when I die or I get divorced, all the money that I've worked so hard to make to get dispersed back into the white community. I want the money to be dispersed back into the black community. So for that purpose, I'd want to marry a black woman. Now you got some black children. If you're black, your children's going to be black. So, you know, that just comes with the territory. But oftentimes there's this idea of what is white is what's right. Right? A lot of white men have dealt with a lot less disenfranchisement. So it's easier for them to come up economically. So for a black woman, she might see that as a standard of masculinity. Another thing to think about it is like this. You ever notice there are certain things that light-skinned men can do that's not going to challenge a woman in how she views his masculinity as much as how she would see it if a dark-skinned man did the same thing. And the same thing can relate to whiteness. So oftentimes a black woman is not going to want a submissive black man, but she might want a submissive white man. Understand what I'm saying by that? Because by naturally viewing whiteness as something that's a little bit softer, she's going to be a little bit more receptive to him behaving in a more submissive or feminine way. Oftentimes, a black man may have a Madonna whore complex, and I've seen black men say this, to where there are certain things sexually that they wouldn't do with black women that they would do with white women. And along that process, you can get overstimulated, because one thing I always say is this: whatever you like as a dominant, you should be able to teach to a woman. Whatever you like as a dominant, you should be able to teach to a submissive. Because if you don't, you can get overstimulated with your submissive sexual ego, and then that'll be, you might get tied into, dealing with feminine dominance. And then when you deal with feminine dominance or masculine dominance as a masculine dominant, then you'll find yourself in a position where either you're going to change where you're at in your polarity, or you're going to deal with a lot of issues in your relationships. And this is why people say that toxic sex is the best sex. Right? So there's a lot of different things that go along with these narratives. There's a lot of things that go along with how racial issues relate to sociosexual dynamics and, the battle of the sexes. Right? There's a lot of different things that go along with it. One thing that I heavily emphasize is I'm a big fan of black love. Like, I try to make sure that my thumbnails have as many black couples as possible, even if it's difficult to find them, because I believe that the black community needs to fix itself first before we worry about a whole bunch of other shit. Some people can take a selfish mindset, and that's cool, but my thing is this: if your game can't work with the women of your own race, then what game do you really have? You're taking an easy route. And there's nothing wrong with necessarily taking an easy route, but I believe that your game should be good enough to deal with women of your own race. And if there's women outside of your race who just so happen to treat you better, then maybe you go for that. You know what I mean? You still want to have peace. You still want to have happiness in your own life. So whoever treats you best, get the best genetic bang for your genetic buck, the best treatment bang for your genetic buck, or for your actual bucks. If you're a masculine submissive, where you trade resources to have access to women, there's something to understand. Another aspect of, like I said, was the religious sexual repression. A lot of black women are more religious, and in the black church, a lot of teachings are a lot less progressive. So there are a lot of things that go on with bad leadership with that, but there's also a lot of things that go on with black women having a heavy level of religious sexual repression that causes them to have a gentleman gigolo complex, and that doesn't correlate all the way the same over to white women in the same way. A lot of white women don't have as much of that. So a lot of white women, they can go be promiscuous during their college years or their high school years, and it may not affect them in the same way that it'll affect, black women, as far as how they'll be viewed, how they'll be seen, how they'll view themselves, and the way that they can kind of just wash over their wholeness in their past and find a man who's going to be with them. Another thing about it is this, though. This is something to understand. Black men tend to have more testosterone on average. Like, that's just a fact. So typically, and there are some studies and people say that black men on average have larger penises. That may be true, may not be true. I don't know. It's true for me, so I don't know how it works for everybody else. But typically how that works is in the same way that nerd black men typically feel about Pookies and Ray Rays is the same way that a lot of white men feel about women who have dealt with a lot of black men, or especially a white man, how he feels about a white woman who deals with black men. So on one side is, once you go black, you don't go black. But the truth is, in a lot of cases, once you go black, you can't go back. So a lot of white women, once they start dealing with black men, they kind of get stuck in that state. And there's a lot of things that go along with it. Sometimes it's just a fling for the moment, just something that's exciting, it's taboo. And when you start with a taboo, that fetish of the situation, it adds to the sexual attraction. And if you're able to integrate from that place of sexual taboo into a sustainable relationship, then oftentimes your sexual polarity will be better than if you see somebody as just that. So for a lot of black men and black women, how those things tend to work is a white woman may see that black skin is more masculine or more dominant, so she may deal with him. And a black man may see a white woman as her white skin being something that makes her more feminine, so he may deal with her. And I think a lot of that is internalized hatred on a black side. There's different things that go along with it. A lot of it is black men allowing themselves to be fetishized by white women, right? And there's a lot of things that go along with it. So I may touch on this topic some more later, but this is just Brody's take on it. I'm out. Goes like